Hey everyone, and welcome back to Let's Build an App. I think we're going to say 2019, seeing as it's late December and mid-December. And this will probably still be relevant in 2019. So if you want to start building, today we're building this login workflow with the same features that world-class apps have, including OAuth and login and show password for mobile users, etc. And if you want to build this and get ready to work, go to the time that's flashing here in the middle of your screen. If you have an extra minute, I want to talk to you about why I'm making this series of tutorials. This is my latest workflow, and I built it from scratch. This is the login workflow with a LinkedIn and a Facebook, and it works and all of that. And I wanted to transfer it over. And I found that I can actually have a repository where I can show my clients and basically with very minimal changes, be able to transfer it over. And I started building out this toolbox for myself where I could pick base colors and basically modify my OAuth SVG buttons. If you don't know what an SVG is, it's scalable vector graphics, and it's much smaller than a PNG or a GIF, right? So, and it's infinitely scalable. So if you zoom in, the lines will always stay crystal clear and sharp, just like these text elements here, etc. So I wanted to build a center where I could quickly, for every new client that I have, just transfer that over and minimize my development time and still have great looking apps. And then I thought, hey, this could actually benefit a lot of people, a lot more people than just myself. And I have a number of friends who do tutorials on YouTube and suggested I document the experience and allow you guys to build world-class apps as well. Because when you're building a minimum viable product, or when you're building a production-ready product, you don't want to spend all of the time that you need to make it fully responsive. You want to build a product, some content, and get it out there as fast as possible. But what if it was just as fast, if not faster, for you to copy-paste different modules like the navbar that we previously built out, or this login logout module, or profile module, etc., in a pre-made site that you can actually apply to your site without buying a template that's bloated with a whole bunch of additional features that you don't need, and that's already pre-optimized to make your app as fast as possible. What if that existed? So that's what I'm trying to build out. And if you're interested, do leave in the comments below. The first 5 people to comment, I want that, or something of that nature. Sounds interesting, whatever. I will give you free beta access so you can actually copy and paste this workflow and not have to build it out. For the rest of you who want to trade your time for some world-class design, keep in mind that these are the tutorials that are currently available, and they are good, and you can build workflows for your MVP. And these will take you much less time to develop than the one I'm about to show you, because, like I said, most of my time is spent actually creating responsiveness for the design and creating, I guess, delight for the user experience. So if you want to go ahead and do that and delight your users in your MVP or your production-ready product with Bubble, you can go ahead and follow this multi-part tutorial of building a login feature. So let's go ahead and get right into it. If you've been following the tutorial, your screen should look something like this with a sign out button that we've just deleted. You can go ahead and just delete that as well. And the next thing is we want to hide the floating group so that in our login page, we don't actually have that header right there. So let's go ahead and go workflow, and let's go element actions. Let's hide floating group A. And the reason we're not putting this in a rest conditional is because we're actually going to build a search bar up here eventually. And for it to work, Bubble needs it to appear on page load. So instead of putting a resting conditional that it doesn't show up on page load, we're going to actually have it always show up on page load, and then we're going to hide it as soon as the page is loaded. But only when, if you remember, we're passing parameters called P, only when P is login. And the next thing we want to do is every time we hit that preview button, we don't want to have to actually type in /login by hand. So we're just going to add this temporary workflow, go to page, index, send more parameters to the page called P, and the P will be login. And only when get data from page URL P is empty. And then put that over here. And this should actually work. Let's test it out. I might have to add a terminate workflow. I don't think I do. Okay, we're good. So login, your page is clean and clear and you have nothing on it. Let's go ahead and start building out the stuff that we need on it. we're going to grab a group. We're going to drag it out here, and we're going to make sure that we have 70 pixel margins on either sides. If you have your gutters enabled, if you have your grid and gutters enabled, dragging it out to the last one here should have 70 on either side, or you can give it a width of 1060 and center it horizontally, and you'll have basically your holder for everything that is login. So we're going to call this login master. And login master is going to hold, like I said, everything. And there's two things we need to do to set this up. The first is we need a group on top here, right here. And this group is actually going to be the one that lets it float 120 pixels from the top when you're looking at it on a tablet or a computer. And then it's going to actually allow it to collapse when you're looking at it on a phone. Okay, so let's go ahead in the responsive tab and set that up. Let's hide group focus A. We don't want that. Let's click on here. And this collapse margin when container width is what's going to regulate. Let's actually make this a red so you can see what's going on. And let's make this one another color so you can see what's going on. And let's go to the responsive tab again. Now, if you look at it, you'll notice that the margins take priority over the width of the element. And what that means is you'll always have margins as wide as possible while leaving this as wide as possible as well. And it's not exactly centered right now for some reason. Center horizontally, responsive. Click here, make sure it's centered. Okay. And what we want is that at a certain point, we want these margins to completely disappear so that on our phones, they're non-existent. If you look over here, there are margins, actually quite wide ones. And on tablet and on desktop, that'll look good. It'll allow us to see our little image in the background. But on a phone, we want a nice clean white login space. So let's go ahead and do that by saying a wrap collapse margins when container width is like 575. Sometimes it doesn't work. Lately, it's always worked for me before until very, very recently. Obviously, I'm trying to make a tutorial, so it's not working. So I'm just going to right click on it, group it into a group, and let's go back to responsive and let's try this again. Let's make it smaller, double click on here and say collapse margins when it's 575, press OK. And then when the page is 575, you'll notice they snap like this. So pretend this red was white on a device that's smaller, like the wider phones, the Notes, and etc. It'll actually snap to the edge right here at 575. And over that, you'll actually see the background. So that's our desired activity. And the next thing is when it's 575, you actually want it to touch the top of the page and not have that 120 pixel margin. The way to get rid of that is to say collapse this group's height when hidden and give it no color and go conditional. And when page width is larger, is smaller or equal to 575, we're also going to remove this group. So let's go ahead. This element is visible, false. So naturally, this conditional is not good enough because we're going to have to say only when the login is visible is this element visible. So we're going to have to play with the conditions later. But for now, it actually allows us to have our red group, which is quite wide. And then as we make it small into a phone, it actually snaps to the top. You'll notice we can't scroll up anymore. So we'll have this nice white page on mobile, and we'll have these nice margins on desktop. Now, these margins are good, but this is actually way too big. If this was white, it's actually way too wide. And if you look at a 4K screen, mine right now is 1080p, so it's not actually that wide. If you look on an even wider screen, this thing will be like, it's, I think, 4100 across on 4K screens or something like that. And this would actually end up being 3000 pixels or something like that. So we don't want that happening. So we're going to go appearance, and we're going to go ahead and apply a max width of 100 when the page is stretched. Now, when we go into here, we'll notice that we have a header and two content groups, and then a bottom, I guess, white space. Now, when we go into, on mobile, we have our header, which is the same as in our desktop. Here we have our 3 OAuth buttons, or sign in with email. And you'll notice when I click on email, it shows email, password, show password, remember me. This is the same as the first group, but these ones actually appear on the bottom instead of being here, and they're different icons. Okay, so all in all, there's quite a bit of work to do, and we're just going to set up our blocks today in this tutorial. So let's grab the email block, this block, and then the blocks that appear and disappear based on page height. Okay, so our first block will be 320 pixels. And I always set it up for 320 pixels centered horizontally and at a Y of 0. Now let's go into the responsive and make sure that this block, which is the header, always stretches the full width of the parent, so 4100. It actually just needs to be whatever width this is, which is, what did I set it up as? 1060, right. So it only needs to be less or equal to 1060 because that group will never be smaller than 1060. It will never be bigger than 1060, and then the margins will snap. And you'll notice that they continue to snap to the phone, and now we have our header. All right, cool. How much height do we need? Let me just go actually check. So for our header, we need a height of 170, and I know this because I've already built it. For you, you could just play around with it based on what you need. But if you're building it exactly like me, you can put in a height of 170, and it'll work. Next, underneath that, we have a longer group, and this group will actually hold all of the other groups. And inside this group, we need a few things. We're going to need this first. This is the first thing we're going to see is the mobile 3 button. So let's go ahead and build that out. It's going to be a height of 200 and let's go a y of 0, an x of 0, and a width of 320, and a height of 260. Okay, and here we're going to have our mobile OAuth buttons. Okay, next underneath that we're going to have another group, and this one is going to hold the email, password, and such like things. So let's go ahead and type email here. Email. Okay, that's really bad. I can't type. Email. And then password. Check boxes and login buttons. Okay, but the thing about password checkboxes and login buttons is that it's a distinct group in and of itself, because right here you see it's not actually visible, and then all of a sudden right here it's visible. So this is the email one that we built, and then we need password checkboxes and login buttons, this group right here. So our email group is going to sit inside this group here, group email. And our password group is going to be a group in and of itself, like we said. And this one will have a height of 200 to fit all of these elements in. And it'll be set up at a Y, I think, doesn't matter for now. We'll just leave it here. We'll have enough room for email and enough room for password checkboxes and login buttons. Okay, next we're going to grab the group email and we're going to close it up to here. Now we have our group email and our checkboxes and all that, and we're going to need this OAuth group next. So let's build that out. We're going to grab our mobile OAuth buttons and we're going to put that right here, holding down Control, making sure that this lights up red so that it stays inside the group. And if you hold down Control, it should slide down and create a duplicate. Now, instead of mobile OAuth, here we're going to write desktop OAuth buttons. Now, desktop OAuth buttons is going to appear, but only at a certain point anyways. Next, what we need, and it's the last little group we need before the white space group, we need an OR and our mobile OAuth icons. And these are going to appear only when the user actually clicks on email. That's the UX. So if you notice here, they're big so that the user can easily click on them. And then if they click on email and they start typing in email, we still want them to be able to change their minds. So we're going to put them here on the bottom. So we're going to build another group right here. And this one will be full width, but we'll have a height of 120. So let's go ahead and set that up, 120. And then let's just drag it up until it snaps over here. If things are not snapping, you go here and you go snap to edges and grids or to edges, or do not snap elements. These are your options right here. I snap to edges and grid, and I figure it out from there. And finally, and lastly but not leastly, we have to grab all our groups and make a little bit of room for that white space. And I do believe 120 will be sufficient. All right, now we've built out all our groups. We have to actually make them work, right? Oh, I forgot to add a little label here. The label is going to be mobile OAuth icons. icons versus buttons, important distinction. Let's take a look at it and see how ugly it is. And let's talk about what we need to do. Oh, yeah, because it snaps, you don't see the red right now. And look at how long it is. And we don't want that. So the first thing we're going to do is in responsive, we're going to select the group desktop OAuth buttons. And we're going to say, okay, that's fine. You can actually snap up when the page is stretched. And there it is. Now you have your email here and your desktop OAuth buttons right here, just like this. The next thing we want is for them not to stretch out as much. We want them to remain relatively small so that they align here in the center. So let's go ahead and do that by selecting max width of 100 and doing the same for the email group, not the password group. Note, do the parent, the email group. And let's go ahead and apply a max width. And now you'll notice they sit in the center here. But this one can actually sit centered. And if this one sits on the left, you'll notice they come together in the middle right here quite nicely. Now we have to pick the longer one of the two groups, which will be probably email because it has more options and it's already higher when we did our build. And we have to add a little line right here. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to click on email. We're going to double click on it. We're going to say define each border independently. And we're going to say border style on the right is going to be solid with a color of DE and a width of 1. And now if we refresh this page, you'll notice everything should start coming together. You have your header up here, then you have your mobile OAuth buttons, and then you have your email and your desktop OAuth buttons and a line right here. Fantastic, except our mobile OAuth buttons don't need to be here and our mobile OAuth icons also don't need to be here. So we're going to go ahead and say collapse this element's height when hidden and not visible on page load. And when does it need to appear is when page width is smaller or equal to the same thing we did in our breakpoints, 575. So when it's 575, it'll actually they'll actually show up. So let's copy this and let's actually paste it onto desktop and say the opposite. When current page width is smaller than 575, you are not visible. Let's make sure that these guys collapse as well when they're hidden. Boom. So now when we have a wide page, we'll have our header. We really need to make the header a different color so you can see that it's not all white space. Let's make it blue. Yes, and this no longer matters because you're never going to see it. It's always being covered by our login screen. So now we have our header, which we're going to write login, right? Like this. Are you new here? Sign up instead. And then here we have our email and we have our desktop OAuth buttons. And as we make this smaller, they're actually going to disappear. There you go, they disappeared. And the mobile ones showed up. There's a little bit of a problem here. I literally forgot to do this. When you hide this element, it will not allow this one to take up space when you hide it with this conditional here. So I lied to you. Let's go ahead and copy this condition and remove it. Mobile OAuth icons as well. We're going to paste that in there. And we're going to say when it's smaller, this element is visible. We're going to add another condition later, but let's just put that in there for now. And let's make it invisible on page load and let's make it collapse. Okay, now if you remember right here, when the screen was small, this desktop OAuth buttons didn't show up anymore, but it actually still took up space as if it were still there. Now the only way to fix that is to go to responsive and to click on it and add a hiding rule. If you add a hiding rule when parent width 575, so if you add a hiding rule, it'll actually disappear in width and in height. If you hide it, it can only collapse in height, but the width will always be there. So we want both of them to disappear. So let's go to 575 on our page width here. That's 555. Let's go to 575 and let's see how wide this is. It should actually be 575 because it should snap at 575. So we can actually go desktop OAuth buttons, add a hiding rule at 575 and click save. And you'll notice that it actually disappears. So you'll notice now that this was allowed to stretch out a little bit more and is no longer centered on the left. It's centered across the whole page because the desktop button disappeared. But this line is still here, so we need to take care of that next. Let's go to email, double click on it, and go conditional when page width is less than or equal to 575, then border style right, where's right? Oh, I know you guys can see it. There you go. Is none. I know you guys can see it and you're like, oh, please click on it, blah, blah, blah. You suck at this. Yeah, I understand. I do. Email, desktop, OAuth, nothing else. Let's make it small. Mobile OAuth. Email is now centered. There's no desktop. There's no border, so you can't tell. And mobile OAuth icons. Next, we want only one of the two mobile icons to appear. Because if you remember our workflow, it starts like this on page load. And you have all of your mobile OAuth buttons. But then if you click on email, it actually hides it. It hides these buttons and it shows these ones on the bottom. So we need to actually do that. But for that to happen, we need a workflow. So we're going to do that in the next video when we actually set up our inputs in all of these cute little buttons. So you'll be realizing now that even just setting up the blocks, not even doing the design, but setting up the blocks to be fully mobile responsive is what takes the longest. And that's why I don't want to be restarting it from scratch every time I make a new app. I want to be just copying, pasting over with all of the with all of that already preset for me so that I don't have to work on it. Like I said, if you want to be a part of that, do put something in the comments showing your interest, and I will give to the first 5 free beta access so you guys can try copying and pasting this exact thing into your site and modifying it as well. And you guys can give me feedback on what you need, and it'll make both my job easier and your job easier. Now, in the next one, we're going to be actually putting in the email design workflows things over here. And we'll be making that happen so that this right now can look like this then. Okay? Talk to you guys in the next video.